Hey everybody, I have a John Deere lawnmower here that we have something weird going on and I want to show you. So the mower is a D100 and it has a Briggs and Stratton engine. It's a single cylinder INTEK 17.5 horsepower overhead valve engine, and when it runs we have oil that leaks out of the fuel pump, which is kind of weird. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that, but let's go ahead and start it up and show you what I mean. Coming out of there. So as you can see, it's been leaking oil out of the fuel pump screen. Basically just a breather screen, and I'm not quite sure what's going on. The first thing I thought was that it had too much oil in it, so I checked that and the oil was fine. But now I'm starting to think that maybe there is back pressure from a blown head gasket. I did notice a little bit of smoke coming out of the exhaust too, so you know, it could very well be a blown head gasket. Let's take a look. So we'll have to take off the intake manifold bolts because that's attached to the head. We will also have to take off the muffler bolts because the muffler is also attached to the head. And we'll take off the valve cover here too, just so we can get a good look at things. Okay, let's get started on this thing. Let's take the muffler off. So this is a 1/4 size Allen wrench. Definitely easier to take these bolts out when they're hot. Usually it's tough to take them out. But I just ran this engine so they're hot still. Alright, so we're loose there. Might as well take the spark plug boot off. Oh, that's nice.
Son of a...
Well, now I get to show you guys how to fix a stripped spark plug cap. Dang, that sucker's on there. There we go. So this is the part we need to reattach to the spark plug cable. Easy enough. Put this piece back on first. If you get the cable wet, it goes on a lot easier. Okay. So you want to make these wires tight again. They were all frayed out. And then you just fold them down like this. And this is the little cap that goes on there. That's the part that goes on the spark plug. And this is the part that wraps around the wire. So I need to bend these little tabs out so I can wrap this around the wire and then crimp it in place. That's the plan, Bubba. So I'm just going to hold on to this end with some pliers and bend open these tabs a little bit. Now I think I should be able to slide that over the wire. It's again, if you make the wire a little wet, it helps. Nope, I've got to make this hole a bit wider. And put this part of the wire on the back side here, just like this. There we go. See how I have it on? So the wire is touching the metal portion. And then you just crimp it in place. I have that sucker crimped down on that cable now. It's not coming off. And now you can pull the boot back down. And we're ready for use. And that's how you fix that. So over on this side, we have to take off the intake manifold, which is this component here. That's a 3/8 socket you'll use for these bolts. Don't lose them. Alright, so you can see the manifold's loose. So now we have to just take this cover off, the whole engine cover here. It looks like if you have a 3/8 socket you can do that. There's 2 bolts in the front here. And there's 2 at the rear on both sides here. There's one. I have a 3/8 socket here. These are kind of hard to get to. Battery's in the way, but you can get to them. So you see the back bolts here have a little longer shoulder portion than the front bolts here, so don't get those mixed up. My socket wouldn't fit on there because the battery's in the way, so I'm just going to use this wrench here. Okay. Alright, all 4 bolts are loose. Well, we have to take this air filter off, so let's do that. this off. This should come off. Just have to lift it up enough so you can get to the head bolts. Alright, let's take off this valve cover. I have a 3/8 socket here. And this one, I don't think there's a gasket. There's just some gasket sealer on here. Sometimes they can be hard to get off. I'm just going to use a little paint scraper. Try to get down in there a little bit. Careful, you don't want to damage anything. Just going to use a hammer here and kind of tap it off here, maybe. Boy, I think I might have to put a heat gun on here to get this off. Try getting it loose from this side here. If you do it this way, just be careful not to have the blade in too deep or you'll run into something. Alright, so I think the top seal is broken. There we go. You'll get a little bit of oil come out. You'll have a little bit of oil come out when you take this off, usually. I kind of have the mower on a slant right now, so let's go ahead and take the head off. Looks like all the head bolts are 3/8. I'm using a 3/8 socket to take them off. One, a little too tight. I think all these are the same size. To use my socket on that one, it's stuck. So the exhaust pipe, it actually just pulls out. So that gives you a little more room. Yeah, all these are the same size so far. Yeah, this hood's getting in my way. Let's go ahead and take it off. So I think if you take those two bolts out and the ones on the other side, this thing will come off, maybe. 10 millimeters. Do want to disconnect the wiring first for the headlights. Hopefully this thing will come up. Yep, it came off. Now I can get to things a little bit easier under here. Looks like I have a couple more bolts on the bottom here. Oh boy, that's tight. Son of a... Yeah. So I think I counted 8 head bolts total. If you have a rubber mallet, that's probably the better hammer to use. But just give it a little bit of a tap here. And out it comes. Keep track of your push rods because the aluminum one goes on the bottom. The steel one goes on the top. Alright. This is a really good example of where these head gaskets fail all the time. It's a very common repair on this style of engine, and you can see where it blows out is right there into the push rod chamber. That's where I always find them blown out. So let's clean up these surfaces. Go get my razor blade. And you can see on the gasket here, it's definitely has a burn mark. And so be careful when you take your head off, because these little caps here can come off. There, see, they come off. Otherwise, everything else stays intact. So this is a pretty good scraper. I got it at an auto parts store. It's pretty cheap. Just takes a little razor blade in there. If you're going to use one of these, just be really careful not to scratch up the aluminum surface. It can deal with a little bit of scratching, but for the most part you want to keep it nice and smooth on the surface. See, I've already scratched it a little bit, but that's okay. Just as long as the gouges aren't too deep. Take particular care in this area here to keep it nice and smooth. Alright, remember, the aluminum one goes on the bottom. We're going to do the same thing to the head surface here. And also we're going to have to clean off the adhesive sealant gasket on the valve cover here. Just be careful not to scratch things up too bad. But you definitely want to get all the gasket material out of there. I also have a little sanding sponge that I'll use to smooth things off a little bit. Yeah, we're getting this surface looking nice. It'll be ready for a gasket in no time. Circular pattern's the best way to do it. You can see we still have a little more gasket up in these corners. Don't want to scratch it. Make sure that none of that debris gets in the engine. There was also quite a bit of buildup in the combustion chamber here, so I'm going to clean some of that off. Alright, this looks pretty good too. Nice and smooth. I have most of the sealant off of here now too. So we're ready to go back on. I got to clean these parts off before I put them back together. And of course you need to clean off the cover here. So here's the new one, and it's a genuine Briggs and Stratton part, and that is the part number. Do confirm your model number because there's a few different types of these, and they all kind of look the same, so make sure to use your model number when you order the parts. And this is the actual model number on this thing, 31G7770171G5. Or is that a C? I can't tell. The gasket goes on dry. You don't have to use any gasket maker or anything like that. The gasket just goes in dry. If you notice any buildup on the inside of this ring here, definitely make sure to clean that off and be very careful not to scratch it, but you do want to clean up the carbon ring if there's any stuff built up there. That's not the right way. Is it the right gasket? Please let it be the right gasket. Yes! Time to put the head back on. Make sure it's clean. Yep, looks good. Just take your time. There we go. Start putting these head bolts in. Hold the gasket in place and the head in. And I'm just going to tighten one of these down to hold the head against the gasket. Not all the way, just tighten it enough so it keeps the head down, just like that. Alright, so there's a procedure. There's a procedure for tightening these bolts down. And there's also a torque specification, so I'll make sure to give you guys that. Oops. Make sure you didn't lose these little caps on top of the valves. Alright, let me go get my manual so we can get the proper torque sequence and specification. So you tighten them down to 220 inch-pounds. Okay, so here's the sequence. The middle one on the bottom is number 1. And then this one is number 2, and then this side one down here is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Alright, so I'm going to set my torque wrench to 220 inch-pounds. And if you don't have a torque wrench that reads inch-pounds, you can use a foot-pound wrench and just adjust it to about 18.5 to 20 foot-pounds. Alright, tighten it till it clicks. There we go. number 3. Good old number 4. Number 5. Six. Over here to 7. And then the last one, 8. All right, so that's how you torque them. 220 inch-pounds. Okay, so now that the head's on, we can put our push rods back in, and I just hold them like this and roll them, make sure they're nice and straight, which they are. And remember, the aluminum goes on the bottom. Well, I guess that would be the intake valve. Just make sure that when you put these in, you get them into the little seats that are back there. The lifters, I guess, is what they are. And you can tell when you're on the lifters, if you rotate the engine, the push rods will move in and out. I'm just going to look with my flashlight here and make sure that it's in there, and it is. Alright, so I had made sure that my push rods, the far end of the push rods, I made sure that it was in the lifters. The other components back on. You have a seal here, make sure not to... I'm not sure what this torque specification is, but I'm just going to say it's not too tight. So tighten it down, just not too tight. How's that for a torque spec? Half a turn before stripped. All right. Yeah, we're good. Okay. And let's get the exhaust back on here. So I have a brand new exhaust gasket here, and I got it through Oregon. And I think that there was the part number through Oregon. And you will want to make sure to get the old gasket off of here. Well, this just fits back down in there. I do need to clean up the surfaces a little bit here. Can be kind of tricky getting everything into place here. And I'm not sure what the torque is on these, so I'll just tighten them down. Not too tight. Just tight enough to squish the lock washer and the gasket. All right. I guess we can put this cover back on. I believe it was the short ones in the front, right? Right, guys? I think so. Review the tape. Yep, it was the short ones in front. Oh, forgot to put that in place. So to check and make sure that the push rods are in their little, to make sure the push rods are in the right place, I just rotate the engine and see how it moved. So that one's in the right spot, or at least it was. Now the bottom one's moving out. See, as long as the push rods are moving when you're rotating the engine, you know you're in the right spot. Looks like it's a size T20 Torx to loosen up the set screws. And now you can get these on the push rod. Make sure you don't lose these little caps. So you put them on the push rods like so. And I'm just going to make them finger tight here. And I just want to verify that the push rods are still in the right place. So I'll rotate the engine, and you see the push rods move. So we are in the right place. So now we know that the push rods are seated in the lifters correctly. But now we need to adjust the valves. So to do that, we have to put the engine in the top dead center position. And to do that, I will take out the spark plug and stick a long screwdriver down in there. And when the piston moves up and reaches top dead center, the screwdriver will be all the way out. Okay, so let's take out the spark plug here. And this is how the Briggs and Stratton manual tells you how to do it. You stick a screwdriver in there and you rotate the engine clockwise, and see how the screwdriver moves in and out on top of the piston. So you want to find the compression stroke, it says, at top dead center, which is the top dead center right after the intake valve sucks in. So right now the exhaust valve is blowing exhaust out, and we're sucking fuel in because the intake valve is open now. And as we go up, we're into the compression or the combustion stroke. And what you want to do is rotate the engine until the screwdriver is all the way out at its highest point. And then you keep rotating it until the screwdriver moves back in about 1/4 of an inch. That's how they tell you how to do it. So right now we're at the top of the travel, and I'm just going to look at the screwdriver here and keep turning clockwise until it goes in about 1/4 of an inch. And that's right about there. So this is where you adjust your valves. And your intake is set at 3 thousandths and your exhaust is set at 5 thousandths. So you have 3 thousandths here for the intake and 5 thousandths for the exhaust. Let's go ahead and do the exhaust first. And you just slide it in between the little cap and the rocker, and you tighten this down. I think I still have to loosen up my set screw a little bit. So you'll tighten this down until you have some slight resistance. That seems to be about right. See how it kind of sticks in there. Yeah, that's a little too tight, so we'll back it off just a hair. I think that's probably going to be about right. So now I want to hold this adjuster in place. Oops, I just moved it a little bit. While I tighten the set screw. So yeah, these set screws, you only tighten down to about 4 or 5 foot-pounds. I think it says 60 inch-pounds. Alright, that should be tight enough. And I just want to confirm my adjustment here. I think I can make it a little tighter. So I'll loosen this up again. Make that a little bit tighter. Hold the adjuster in place while I tighten the set screw down. Alright, now let's see where we're at. That feels about right. A little sticky when going in and coming out. Same procedure on this one except for going to 3/1000ths. And let's just double check, make sure we're still set. I think that feels about right. It slides in and out kind of stiff. So let's cinch this one down. All right. And I'll put a new spark plug in here. NGK, it's the only spark plugs I use. BKR 5E. About 3/4 of a turn. Once you get it finger tight, put the cap back on. There we are. And now it's time to goop up the valve cover and stick it in place. And if you put too much of this stuff on, it'll squeeze out and get into the valve, so you don't want to put too much on. Make sure you get it right side up, and once you stick it on, try to keep it on. This is how I do it. Just kind of like that. Oops. And I always make a mess. It just wouldn't be right if I didn't make a mess. I'm going to let this dry overnight before I start up the engine. But I think our repair is done now, folks. Good old John Deere, complicating things since a long time ago. Let's test this baby out. One thing I did want to mention is before I assembled all of this, I did put some oil lube on all the little components wherever metal touches metal. I just forgot to show it on my camera, so make sure to lube up the valves and the rocker arms and all that stuff before you put the cover back on. Well, that problem is fixed, but it does sound like this thing needs some carburetor work. That'll be a video for another day. See you soon. Thanks for watching.